welcome to our channel. My name is Crystal. Hi. Oh, I'm so happy that you're here with me today. I am so excited. I love fall. We are a few days out from the official first day of fall time. So in this video we're going to be showing our pumpkin harvests, winter squash, and sunflowers. They're not all ready, but I'm going to be harvesting a lot of different stuff. Some of the things I've already had to start harvesting, so I made sure to film those, and I'll be able to include that footage today in this video. We would love to have you watch the entire thing, but if there's a specific part that you're looking for, you can go ahead and check out the description and just click the timestamp that's there, and it will just bring you right to that part of the video. Also in the description I will include all of the seed varieties that I talk about in this video, along with where we bought them. Let's start with the winter squash. Winter squash is meant to be stored over winter, so it has a hard rind on it that you usually can't penetrate with your finger once it's ready to be picked, and it just stores really well in our basement. In the right conditions, they can last a really long time, and it is now one of my most favorite things to grow because I still get to enjoy the harvest from my garden over the winter time, well through the springtime as well. So it's just a really great thing to grow. So this is our first year growing Honeynut squash. I had heard about it, I don't remember from where. I'd either heard about it from somebody or I saw it on one of the websites, but this is our first year growing it. This one here, it's starting to turn orange, so I'm gonna go ahead and harvest it. Plus my nail is not able to break the skin, so I'm just going to cut the stem as long as I can, like that, and there you go. So a Honeynut squash is a cross between a butternut squash and a buttercup squash. I started these seeds back in May. The date that I had written down was May 21st. Usually they're typically ready to be harvested at the end of September, beginning of October, which is kind of where we are right now. It's the middle of September, and I'm not going to be harvesting all of them. I'm just going to be harvesting the ones that are on the orangey side, just to get them off of the vine and into where we're going to be storing them. And these are the two Honeynut squash that's growing in the fabric pot. They're still green and a little bit of orange. My thumbnail is not able to break the skin, so it should be fine stored where we keep our winter squash. One of the things that I learned since this was my first year growing it is they are very prolific plants. They produce a lot of squash. Most of them were grown over a handy panel bent in half, and that seemed to work really well for the Honeynut squash. I would probably most likely grow them that way again next year. The other good thing about the Honeynut squash is they don't get very big, so sometimes butternut squash can get really large and Honeynut squash stays pretty small. I tied them up because I didn't know how big they were gonna get really, and so I tied up some of them, but I didn't need to. They're small enough that they will handle their own on a trellis. You don't really need to support them in any way, so I like that. Now that kind of leads into butternut squash. This is our second year growing butternut squash, and after last year we had such wonderful luck with our butternut squash plants. I got so much squash from 3 different plants that I had. So I harvested 3 of them. And then I noticed that we had a couple more growing, so I made sure to support those up a little bit using the t-shirt rags. Those aren't quite ready to be harvested yet, so I'm just gonna leave those for now, but I did get 3 of them so far. All right, so a couple of things I wanna share with you is this. This is a butternut squash that we grew last year, and it is still perfectly good, and I might use it this weekend to make my mock macaroni and cheese. I guess it would be macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese.
Macaroni and cheese? Well, the macaroni's not mock, the cheese is mock. So
I get the joke.
yeah, all right. Well, anyhow, and then these are the ones that we grew this year. They're a little bit different in size. As you can see, this is the color that you're looking for when you harvest a butternut squash. It's like a tan whitish color, and when you go to put your thumbnail into it, it doesn't puncture the skin at all. So that's what you're looking for. And then you do want to keep the stem as long as possible. I don't feel like I'm getting as much as I did last year, and I feel like that might be because I did more of an in-ground bed situation. I didn't really control the nutrients in the soil as much. and also maybe the location was a little too crowded. So next year I think I'm going to try and make a more dedicated spot for these plants so that they can do a little bit better. I had 2 varieties of squash that I didn't grow very good. One was the acorn squash. This is our first year trying to grow acorn squash, and we didn't really get a lot of them. I only got 1 from 2 plants. They just didn't do good. And I'm fairly certain it's just I overcrowded the plants and didn't put them in the best of soil conditions. So I think that might have been what my problem was. This is the only acorn squash that we got this year. The stem ended up falling off of it because right after I harvested the squash, I ended up dropping it because there was a spider on it, and that caused the stem to come off. But the outer skin is tough and it should keep in our basement pretty good for a little bit. And it was our second year trying to grow spaghetti squash and our second year failing at it. Both this year and last year we ended up with a bug problem on the spaghetti squash that ended up just rotting them. We had a really nice spaghetti squash growing over the top of the trellis, and what I didn't realize is that there were bugs that had gotten into the stem of it and pretty much had rotted it. And when I brought it inside, it went bad immediately, and I actually have it. I'll go get it because I'm gonna just end up giving it to the chickens. Yeah, so, oh, it's all mushy. This is the spaghetti squash that we grew this year, and we only got 1. There is another one on the vine, but I don't think it's gonna ripen. This one has some damage on the back of it, and into the stem it's all soft. I had that issue with some of the pumpkins that we grew too. I don't know. I'm just gonna try and do better next year for how we trellis it and how we grow it, because I would really like to try some spaghetti squash that we grow at home. This is the Lady Godiva pumpkin that I already harvested a little bit ago. It's got some orange coloring. So when I harvested it, it didn't quite have all of this orange coloring to it yet. It was kind of a subdued orange like this side. As it ripens and gets to, you know, the stage where we're gonna wanna cut it open to get to the seeds and stuff, it's gonna turn more of this orangey color. But aren't they pretty? They're so pretty. I really like them. The first time I heard about them was because I had some seeds gifted to me last year. So here is another Lady Godiva squash that I haven't harvested yet. I direct sowed these seeds around the beginning of June. I put 2 seeds within a couple inches of each other in the strawberry bed. And then I just made sure to train the vines outside of the bed and in a couple of different directions so that they weren't overcrowding each other, and that worked out really good. They did really well. I was surprised to learn the reason why it's called a Lady Godiva is because the seeds inside are essentially naked. They don't have any outer shell on them, which made them so good. We are huge fans of roasting seeds here. These pumpkin seeds, they were delicious. They're the best tasting seeds. They don't have that outer shell on them. With that said, that does mean that you need to harvest them just at the right time and make sure that you don't let them sit too long, that you actually get them cut up, get the seeds harvested and dried. So because they don't have that shell, they can kind of go bad quickly, or they can actually re-sprout. Last year, one of the ones I cut open actually started sprouting new plants inside the pumpkin because the moisture and then being in the sunlight actually caused the seeds inside to sprout. So it's just something to keep in mind, that you don't want to wait too long with a Lady Godiva squash. So you can eat these right away just as they are. They're great on salads by themselves without roasting them, or we just really like to roast them. They get a little bit of a crunch to them, and we add some salt, and it's just, they're so good. We just really enjoy them. Now I'm gonna combine the sugar pie pumpkin and Connecticut field pumpkin into the same category because it is essentially the same methods of growing. Last year we didn't have to buy any pumpkins from the store. This year I'm not really getting that much. Some of them I've noticed actually had a lot of bug damage and are rotting quickly. I already had to throw a sugar pie pumpkin to the chickens, which they loved it, but you know, I didn't get to enjoy it myself. We soaked these seeds in a saltwater mix for a few days before we planted them. These seeds were started at the beginning of June, and I harvest them once the rind of the pumpkin is mostly orange. Just keep the stem as long as possible. I realize that's hard on some of them. Sometimes they grow with really short stems. So what I do is, if the most of the vine is dead anyway or dying back, I'll actually cut the vine, some of the vine with the stem so that it has that extra space. While I liked this layout of how I did the pumpkins this year, it was great with all the mulch, the bare mulch. There's nothing growing over here, and the vines had plenty of room to spread out. I just feel like maybe where I started the seed actually needed more fertilizer or better nutrition in the soil. So I'm going to try and figure out what that balance is and hopefully get an even bigger harvest next year of pumpkins. State Fair winter pumpkin. This thing is crazy. I am thrilled to announce that we actually have another one growing. I'm so excited about it. These things are amazing. It's just amazing to me how large these pumpkins get. This was a $2 seed packet from MIgardener, and it came with 3 seeds inside, but the seeds were huge. And I knew as soon as I took them out before I planted them that I needed to soak these things. So I soaked them in that saltwater mixture and I left them in there for a few days. And even after a few days, they didn't get soft like the other ones did. And so I ended up, just because it was starting to get nervous, I've never grown them before, I ended up starting them in 3.5-inch pots out here, and I put them in our mini greenhouse, and they sprouted so fast. I feel like soaking them really did help that process. Once the plant itself got, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 inches in size, I made sure to quickly transplant them into the ground. All I did was I tilled up the soil really well, and then I mixed in some fertilized soil into that. And then I transplanted the plant in there. I put a little bit of landscape fabric around it and some mulch just to keep that area clear. And then I put a stake in the ground because I grew them in our yard around the garden, but it was still just a grassy area, no special soil or anything like that. Here's the thing. Once the fruit looks like it's been pollinated, that's when I start pruning vines. So pumpkins usually get runners off of their main vine, and that produces even more pumpkins potentially. But I really wanted the energy of the plant to focus on this one State Fair winter pumpkin. So I actually trimmed the vines and cut the head of the plant off too. And then I kept a couple of the runners, but I really wanted the focus to be on this one pumpkin, and it seemed to work out really good. All right, I'm kind of scared to do this, but this was the only pumpkin that this vine produced. So let's see how we did. I'm not concerned about saving the pumpkin vine itself, and I want to keep the stem as long as possible, so I'm just going to go ahead and actually cut some of the vine. Wow, this thing is perfect. So that's the bottom part of the pumpkin that was resting on the ground while it was growing. It's not going to be orange, the same color as the rest of the pumpkin. It's not rotted, it's not soft or anything. I'm just gonna cut some of this off here. This looks great. What a cool pumpkin. Can't wait to show Steve. All right, I'm gonna try and get it over to the table. Like I said, this is our first year growing these, and we do not regret it at all. They are amazing, and I'm gonna grow these every year. I just hope I'm able to grow them from our own seeds, because I think that's just so cool. That's such a cool process. I'm gonna be very careful when I harvest the seeds to make sure that I save the biggest ones and dry them out good, and then keep them in an envelope in a dry place. I can't wait to weigh it and see how heavy this thing is. So behind me here, I have sunflowers. I grew so many different varieties of sunflowers this year. I can't even tell you. I will for sure be putting the varieties in the description with the company that they came from. I know the ones that are like 11 feet tall behind me, those are Mammoth. Those are the Mammoth sunflowers. I know that one for sure. So next year I think I'm gonna really double down on growing sunflowers around the property, just so I can save the seeds for the chickens. I feel like I didn't really grow enough this year for that. So once the sunflowers' enormous blooms have died back, they've turned kind of brown and yellow, and they're really dried out, it will be time to harvest the seeds. I cut the flower head off the stem about 8 to 12 inches below the flower. It's starting to be a little rotted on the back. You see how it's starting to rot a little? I might have waited too long to harvest this. Alright, so here's a good example of one that's not ready to have the seeds taken out yet. It still has a lot of the petals on it, and it's still very green. It hasn't turned like a yellow or a brown yet, and the flowers aren't really coming off on the inside. So, and I don't really see the seeds yet. So I'm just gonna actually just leave this one here for now. These ones might not be ready yet, so I'm just gonna hang them upside down to dry. They're still white with a little bit of black striping, and I'm just gonna hang them upside down until I think it's time for them to be harvested out of here. Once they're all done, I bring them over to a table and get to work. And the kids like doing this too. All we do is we brush off the little blooms that are on the sunflower itself, and then we start pulling the seeds out. And we leave them in a single layer to dry overnight. And then this year I'll be for sure saving a bunch of them for the chickens. Okay, so here's what we have. I'm gonna have to get a weight on this pumpkin, but I'm gonna wait for Steve to get home to do that, and I'll put it here how much this thing weighs. You want me to look?
Yep, I'm not going to be able to.
After doing some math, we figured out that it is between 60 and 65 pounds, this pumpkin. So that's pretty enormous. But this is our State Fair winter pumpkin. We do have another one growing back here, so I'm excited to see how big that one gets. I don't imagine that it's going to get as large as this one, but we'll see. Bunch of Honeynut squash and a lot more of those growing. These are some of the sunflowers. I didn't end up harvesting them all just because they're not ready yet. So these were some of the ones that were ready. This one, they're supposed to be kind of white, but mostly gray striped, and they're clearly just not that yet. That one's a little bit early. And then we have the Lady Godiva squash, an Acorn squash, some Butternut squash, 2 sugar pumpkins, and 2 Connecticut field pumpkins. This one's clearly smaller than this one, but they're both Connecticut field pumpkins. And this one's already starting to kind of rot a little. I might end up cutting into and saving the seeds from it and then giving the rest of the chickens. But that's it for this fall harvest. We recently went apple picking, and I'm gonna be canning up some applesauce today. Make sure you subscribe so you can keep up with the canning videos that come out. I try and post canning videos every Sunday. I have our YouTube shorts that I share on here, so if you're interested in those, you know, check out our main channel page, and we have all of our shorts on there, but they're best seen on your phone. So if you're interested in those little quick videos that are less than a minute long, then check those out also. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing. We would really love to have you here, and we appreciate any support and encouragement we get in the comments section. This community is really cool to be a part of. But thank you so much for being here and watching. We really do appreciate you, and we will see you next time. Bye.